All right. Hello. Hi, Emma. How are you doing?
I'm great, Ness. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. And hello to everybody watching us today. Thank you for joining us. And welcome to the next in our series of Running Your First Customers. I'm super excited to be joined by Emma today, CEO of Deployed, who are building a really exciting and powerful tool that allows businesses to define project work better from the get-go. And I know from my own experience working both agency as the supplier and in-house as the buyer on both projects, there's always a ton of misalignment and misunderstanding that crops up. And if we'd just taken the time to figure it out and unite as a team at the beginning and find some common language, we would have got to our outcomes much more quickly and successfully. So hugely exciting opportunity for Deployed. And yeah, really excited to hear about your journey so far. So just to kick things off, before we jump into the business, do you want to give a little bit about your background and how did you become a CEO of a tech startup?
Of course, thanks, Ness. I have two other co-founders, and we decided to really kick off Deployed in 2019. Mm-hmm. And the idea really came about from Jamie and Kaylee, my two co-founders, experiencing this pain when they were both at a large financial services company. And they just really noticed the wastage. They noticed the lack of effort that was going in up front to define work properly before a project would start. And actually my background is I'd built an on-demand platform before for blue-collar workers, so very sort of fast freelancer models. So I came at it from a very, very different perspective of how can we remove that friction and sort of speed up transactions and get them going faster. And then Jamie and Kaylee had experienced it at large enterprise companies and how poorly statements of work were written. So we all came together with a shared goal, but from very different perspectives of really, really wanting to rewrite the language of work and really empower authors within a business to be able to articulate what services they're buying. And we're really seeing a huge amount of spend in services procurement across both large corporates and all the way down to mid-sized companies. So really, that's a little bit about our background and what we're doing with Deployed.
Amazing. And so 2009, so you're coming up to your third year of so far. What are the most significant business milestones that you've hit so far in that 3-year journey?
There's been a lot. I think with any startup, there's so many challenges along the way. I think probably some of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurs, the very sort of archetype of an entrepreneur is that actually you're really optimistic, very ambitious, and probably that for many people manifests into thinking that you'll get things done faster and it won't be that difficult for you. And there's been a lot of challenges along the way and some fantastic milestones, but I think probably one of the most significant things is learning that things actually do take a lot longer than expected, and just sort of sheer willpower and ambition will not speed up the process, particularly when you're selling to large enterprise clients. So probably some of the milestones that we've had along the way is in March of 2020, we found out that we'd won the Melinda Gates Female Founders Award. And we were the global winner for Enterprise SaaS, up and coming. And that was really significant for us in a few ways. One, obviously, we got fantastic backers and we had investment from Microsoft or M12, their venture arm, and from Mayfield. And that was fantastic as we were just sort of heading into COVID, and a lot of founder friends were very sort of anxious about where that money was going to come from with the uncertainty in the market. But also another thing for us was that validation that actually what we were working on and this problem that we were trying to solve had been validated by the likes of Mayfield and Microsoft and the Melinda Gates Female Founders. So that was a huge milestone. And then probably another significant milestone is that when we really went out to market of Q4 last year with a product that was ready to be able to be demoed and it had enough security and infrastructure around it to be able to sell to large enterprise clients, that we straight off the bat were able to sell 3 proof of concepts to large enterprise clients. And that really for us was, again, validation that actually we are building a painkiller and we're not building a vitamin, and actually large enterprises really, really want this.
Yeah, nice. And did you focus really heavily on the product for your first sort of year or so then, or were you working on selling in tandem but selling without a product to kind of validate, or what did that look like?
Yeah, a little bit of both. The biggest thing for us was that actually we had 2 experts. So Jamie and Kaylee had actually experienced this problem. So in the absence of having an initial customer, we were able to use their experiences from both buyer and seller, and actually how they wanted to see the world and what would have made their life so much easier within these large financial services companies. So they were really our proxy for the customer in the first place. Unfortunately, selling to enterprise is really not the ability to go out and sell on slideware. They want a demo, they want to know your architecture and how it's built and how secure it is, particularly when you're looking at the types of data that is found in statements of work, and particularly sort of high cost statements of work that could have, and typically change projects. So actually there could be sensitive information in there as well, and allowing a startup to have access to that. So we definitely went out to a lot of friendly faces and said, actually, this is what we're thinking. These are the wireframes. This is how we think it'll actually work. And obviously we were building an MVP in the background. And we used a few sort of friendly faces to help us, confirm and validate how we were solving the problem. I think one of the biggest things for us as a company is there was never any doubt that this problem existed. It was how are we going to solve this? Are we going to be the most innovative solution on the market? Or are we just going to digitize an existing process that's already there? And we knew really to own this market that we would need an innovative way to solve this, as opposed to just digitizing an analog layer.
Yeah, totally. And how did you, because I think it's a really interesting challenge, that one of starting with enterprise clients and breaking down knocking on those doors and having those conversations. How did that come about? Like, how did you get your first real conversations with those first few customers at an enterprise level?
You're absolutely right. It is sort of fascinating, the enterprise journey. There's been many times where we've thought, actually, maybe we should have gone after mid-market clients and clients that didn't have as long a sales cycle. However, we really had our eye on the prize with enterprise clients, because they spend significantly a lot more on statements of work and project-based works than smaller mid-market clients would. So that was definitely a real target for us. Plus, Jamie and Kaylee had experienced the pain there and actually realized how much more was intense than that wastage and that lack of project success actually within a company that then is spending hundreds of millions on their projects. And we're able to reduce that. We're able to sort of fix that pain for them immediately. And actually probably some of the early successes that we had knocking on doors of larger clients was that the minute we were able to do events. So actually, I think one of our first events that we did was Digital Procurement World, DPW, which would have been pre-COVID. So 2019, maybe it was August 2019. And I had a spot on the Dragon's Den that they had operated. It was the first year that DPW was there. And although you only have 5 minutes to talk about your problem and your solution, actually the minute that we talked about the problem and the pain point and then how we were actually going to solve this, Kaylee, my co-founder, was in the audience, and we already had sort of 5 or 6 big name brands that were there saying, yes, we spend hundreds of millions on this, and how can you solve this problem for us? So we found actually getting out and being able to present on stage and people saying, yes, we face that problem. That was actually, that was a bit of a game changer for us as well, as opposed to reaching out to people individually on LinkedIn and tracking down customers.
Yeah, fair. And has that strategy continued to work for you through those first few years then, focusing on that kind of top level, I guess, higher level awareness versus direct sales?
Yeah, absolutely. It really has. we have continued to do that, and we've just been a bit more targeted with the events that we do. So do we have any of our ideal customer profiles in the audience? The deployed solution has a few different facets of it. So we have the authoring platform, which actually anyone in the business who's drafting a statement of work can use, but typically they're not our budget holders. Yeah. So either someone in procurement that's actually feeling this pain a lot more when they're having to review poorly written statements of work. So actually we'd targeted a lot of procurement focused events, and that way we were actually seeing our economic buyer say, actually, this is a problem, or this is part of our strategy to make sure that we're getting a handle and we're better on our spend on project-based spend.
Yeah, makes sense. And what did, over those that period, as you're sort of seeing that early growth, how did you make your first sort of hiring decisions to bring the right people on to join you and your co-founders? What was your first hire?
Our first hire was within engineering. I guess with the three co-founders, Jamie had sat in a CTO role before, but definitely more sort of commercial CTO than sort of technical CTO. And Kaylee and I were very much commercial and commercially minded, commercial co-founders. And so our first hires were very much into the technical side and engineering. And actually one of our other first hires, it was Josephine, and she was actually an intern that started with us. And then she sort of supported, who's still with us today, supporting on a lot of our strategy and looking at our ecosystem. And so two different camps, but a lot of our first hires in engineering.
Yeah. And what was the tipping point, do you think, when you decided to hire specifically within sales and marketing?
I guess it was, another sort of key hire for us was Carly, who's our head of sales and partnerships, and actually looking at, delivering more sort of top of funnel customers and bringing customers in that actually we were like, we've got messages going out from the different co-founders, we've got team members pushing messaging out. And actually for our customers now, there was a tipping point where we recognized we needed to have a bit more cohesive messaging across from our website to how we're pushing things out. Is the tone of voice the same? Are we on brand? And I guess it's just probably that development for a company in general that you go, through those toddler years and actually start to become a bit more sophisticated, and actually your customer wants to see consistent messaging and actually really articulating your pain point that resonates for them. So I think it was definitely that point of supporting our growth, and giving our customers consistent messaging rather than being a bit all over the place, different tone of voice or different interpretation of the tone of voice from the different founders for pushing things out on LinkedIn.
Yeah, totally. And was that a sort of piece of work that you chose to invest in through kind of getting external support to help you develop that? Or was it something that you developed yourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. We knew that we didn't have the skill set to do it ourselves. And obviously working with the Scale Up Collective have just been fantastic to help us really hone, and hone our messaging, support us with our strategy as well. And then previously to working with yourself and Scale Up Collective, we had worked with Koto to really look at our brand and our logo and sort of the visual aspects of Deployed. So we're very excited to continue that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's often some of the a challenge. And I know from my own experience of working in a head of marketing role in a growing startup, it's kind of like knowing where to place your bets in terms of there's a certain amount of budget available and you've got goals to hit. It's kind of knowing what is going to be the biggest impact for your business at that stage. And it's kind of interesting that there was a focus for you guys reasonably early on that kind of brand piece as well, of like not just what you're saying, but kind of how you're showing up. Because I think that's something that people often debate with quite a lot. It's like, is that the right thing to invest in? But it's kind of such an important part of how you're seen in the market and by your customers. I'm personally a huge believer in kind of brand and getting that right from the start, and obviously iterating on it as you go. But I think particularly in the space that you're playing in, having that kind of uniqueness has probably helped create some of those opportunities, right? By showing through your brands that you're doing this totally differently, not just, as you said at the beginning, digitizing an analog layer of a process, but completely coming at it from a completely new angle. And to do that, you've got to look and feel very different and behave very differently.
Yeah, and that's what helps you stand out, right? Stand out from the crowd. And I think like every startup, it's always a matter of time until your market becomes really flooded, and having that really unique opportunity at the beginning to actually not have a huge amount of competitors, and particularly not solving it the way you're solving it, that really heavily relies on brand and marketing and tone of voice, to your point precisely, to actually stand out and stand out early and be seen as the trusted brands in that space.
Yeah, totally. And again, I think it's sort of interesting going back to what you said before, of that in those early days, kind of doing the sort of product and sales and marketing piece somewhat in tandem, because again, I think there's a hesitancy a lot of the time to wait until you've got something to sell before you start selling it. And exactly this challenge of you miss a really open market opportunity then to really create a space for yourself, because you're kind of waiting, and then before you know it, 5 other people have suddenly come along and done something very similar, and you're having to compete. And it's something we talk about a lot, which is, and actually in the conversation we had last week with Ali from Juno, he was saying, he started with just a landing page, no product, just a landing page, and telling people this product, and having those kind of early conversations, and like you did with kind of these bigger enterprise clients, or whether you've got an audience that you can just throw up a landing page and start promoting it to, and kind of getting feedback, is often a really important part of that early journey. And knowing what you know now on this journey, what would you have done differently if you were starting again from the very beginning?
It's always a really challenging question, because hindsight is a fantastic thing. Deployed is actually not my first startup, and I do wonder sometimes whether I had done things differently when I'd said, I would do that differently next time. And on reflecting on that, have I, with my lessons learned from previous startups, even though it was in a very different space? I think the key things that I've learned is actually hiring right, and hiring the right team, and hiring a team that has a cultural fit. I think we, as founders, you come across a lot of people when you're interviewing that have the skill, the capabilities to deliver, but do they fit culturally into the team? I think is just one thing that you can't afford to get wrong. I think we all recognize that actually a wrong hire can have such an impact on the business. Initially when you're trying to ramp someone up, it has an impact on productivity. It has an impact on the other team members that are trying to help them be onboarded and bring them up to speed. And if you have a cultural mismatch in there, inevitably that person probably won't stick around, or it's not really the right fit. That then the offboarding and the rehiring again is just really unnecessarily wasted time. One thing that I wanted to do differently with Deployed that I'd done from my previous businesses is actually really articulate our values upfront, because by articulating our values and making sure that we're making decisions and we're living by those values has actually really created a strong culture within our company, even at the stage of when there's 5 or 6 of us there. And actually that's helped us identify the right hires. And when they culturally fit, it's like a good relationship. Things are just easy. You continually stay in that honeymoon period where you're just delighted to work with a company that shares your own values, because it doesn't mean that there's a mismatch or you're being pulled in a different direction against your values. And I really think that is hugely underestimated in early stage startups, that they're like, we'll get to that when we're 20 people, or we'll think about that because it'll organically grow. And then the absence of having really clear values, they will just start to manifest themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. That's such good tip. And I've actually just had a question come through from someone who's watching, hi Lee, who has asked, how different have you found it with co-founders rather than on your own?
I couldn't do it without them. So as three of us, we're affectionately termed 3Co amongst the team. It's just really supportive. I think the three of us come from very, very different backgrounds, and we have very different skill set. For me, this time round, I know someone else has my back. And again, when we talk about sort of time and speed on execution, you get taken out for a week with COVID, and who else is going to sort of pick up unless your team's big enough? And just knowing that I have two other co-founders that are able to support has been incredible. And actually, sometimes you can, with very different perspectives, you can disagree on things, but actually we've got to a point where actually disagreeing for the sake of the next step for the company has actually been fantastic. You don't always want to be sort of kumbaya and this is the right way forward. Some of the best decisions are made when you actually disagree and you're able to see someone else's perspective, and that diversity of thought across all of us has definitely helped us make decisions that maybe had it only been me, I would not have made the decision that actually we made collectively as a group. So I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, awesome. And before we go, last question. If you were sharing advice with a fellow founder who's starting out much earlier on in the journey, when they were just trying to find their first customers and sort of starting that growth journey, what would your top tips be for them?
Market research, and don't ask your mum. I think, or friends or family. I think there's a fantastic book named maybe the Mom Test.
Yeah, I love it.
I think it's really challenging for people who know you to give you what they would see as negative feedback or constructive feedback. And I don't think we really understand what our customers want unless you get out there and you're vulnerable enough to say, hey, would you buy this? Or how much would you pay for this? Or here's a wireframe, test it out. And I think that investment up front to create, typically a lot of people are very visual. So having clickable wireframes, and there's so many tools on the market now that you can use to create what you want, and go out and talk to all of those people that, you're not friends with, you don't know. And actually, as much as you can feel slightly wounded if you don't get the feedback that you want, that could actually help pivot you into actually really understanding, your market. Is it slightly adjacent to what you've been thinking, or is how you're going to solve it really different? And I think spending more time on that upfront, you will never regret it, because those insights that you get will really help you shape the business. And a pivot before you start building is way easier and more cost effective than a pivot post your business already being out there and being live in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. And that is, I think, again, it's a similar, I think, be interesting to hear how you actually manage that. Because I think in a similar challenge, it's like, how do you get in front of people to do that market research? Is that something you just did to your own networks, or you worked with a research partner, or how did you actually do it?
We did actually work with a research partner. Actually, before we did our first friends and family round, we actually won an Innovate UK government grant. And actually the theory behind the government grant was that it was £40,000 that was to be spent on R&D and design, because their theory was startups don't allocate the funds to go and do this up front. Therefore, is it going to make sure that the business is valid by the time it comes to market? We used a fantastic company run by husband and wife couple, Clara and Adrian, and Special Projects. And they really went out and interviewed key people who were in the industry, key people who would be using this solution. And actually, it was at that very beginning piece that we decided to slightly pivot the business idea from what it initially was. So I firsthand can say that actually doing that. And when we were watching the interviews back and some of this, so we didn't do it ourselves. And again, I think it puts that distance between someone providing really honest feedback when they think they're going to hurt your feelings. That was just so eye-opening. Some of the assumptions that we'd had made were just not how our customers saw the world or viewed the world, or even thought that some of the solutions that we were trying to build were relevant or even useful for them.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And I totally agree with that kind of unconscious bias that I think can happen in research, despite all your best efforts. And I've certainly seen this before in the past, when you look for things you want to see and hear, right, and don't necessarily listen as acutely to the things that you're that don't perfectly align with what you're looking to find. So I do think it's a really valuable, if you're in a position to do so, to have somebody external just to kind of help pick out those really important bits. Great, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Emma. It's been so good to speak to you, and lots of useful stuff in there. So we'll be sharing some of that in our newsletter as well later this week, so that people can catch up if they missed our session today. And yeah,
thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure. Thanks, Nath.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.